Kirby and the Forgotten Lands brand new Switch 2 edition, giving us Starcross World, actually gives us a lot of lore. If you collected all the figures and actually played through the entirety of that side story, there's a lot to talk about that adds to the current lore of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. But in order to figure out what's going on and what's happening with the story, we have to go back to the first game real quick, because let's recap what happened with Fecto Elfilis. Many years ago, a creature arrived in the Forgotten Land, known as Fecto Elfilis. He came and wreaked havoc all over the entire civilization. Thankfully, the people of the Forgotten Land were able to actually capture and contain the creatures somehow. In doing so, they were able to use the powers of Fecto Elfilis to create their own planetary warp technology. They would use this technology to travel to the land of dreams to them, apparently, where they would take a spaceship in order to travel to that world. Starcross World gives us a look at some of the ships that they used in order to travel to this new world. The description states, the spaceship New World is capable of warping to other galaxies. It's a prototype, but it's similar to another ship that once took travelers to the stars. The familiar theme park Wanderia and a special song, you know the one, were used to make travelers feel safe as they boarded. The game talks about how this is a prototype and that this was similar to another ship that took people across the galaxies into other planets. Of course, referencing the lower star cutter from Kirby's Return to Dreamland. If you look at this prototype, it's actually the same ball that sits at the top where the operating systems are in the lower star cutter, right below the mask of the ship. However, the description states that this prototype is similar to another ship that once took travelers to the stars. So I don't think they're related, but it is strange how they look very, very similar. Now, we actually made a theory a long time ago with the Forgotten Land stating that maybe the ancients were the people of the Forgotten Land, and they were the ones that built the Lore Star Cutter in order to head to a new world. Now, I still think this theory has merit, and there's even more evidence to talk about. Could just be a chance that the people of the Forgotten Land used the technology that they got from Fecto Elfilis in order to craft their version of their own Lore Star Cutter that looks similar to this version that we see in Kirby's Return to Dreamland, that another civilization created, which would just seem strange. So to me, I really do think there's a connection with the people of the Forgotten Land in the original Lore Star Cutter. Now, that description of the ship actually tells us why Wanderia's theme park was made and why that special theme song that we hear at the beginning of the game and the end of the game was even a thing in the first place. And apparently it was just to kind of soothe everybody down and relax everybody, because we have this billboard figurine and it might seem pointless, but it's actually very important. It's called the Twinkling Star Showers Song Sign, and it states, a poem passed down through the ages was thought to contain a prophetic message, but no one could fully decipher it until a singer had a breakthrough in a dream. Her song debuted according to the prophecy, the day the ship left the planet. It was played on board, giving hope to all who heard it. Now, this is pretty interesting because the whole entire story of the Starcross World was about this meteor, and apparently this meteor had a lot of lore behind it, and apparently the residents of the Forgotten Land knew that a meteor would be coming because it was in a poem that was also a prophetic message that was passed down through generations. So it makes me wonder, maybe the ancients were from the Forgotten Land and from a very, very long time ago, and they knew that there would be some type of darkness in the form of a meteor coming to their world, and they were trying to prepare their future generations for that inevitable fallout. But anyway, before they took their spaceships to the new world and left this world behind, they had an accident while containing the specimen of Fecto Elfilis, where it actually split the specimen into two separate entities, into Elfilin, the small little companion to Kirby, and into Fecto Forgo. Obviously, after everybody leaves this creature in confinement, years would pass, and Fecto Forgo would infect the creatures of this world, including the Beast Pack and the leader, Leongar. He would then manipulate them and then control them in order for them to bring Elfilin to him so he can once again become whole into his full form, the ultimate life form, becoming Fecto Elfilis. We then know Kirby is actually able to defeat Fecto Elfilis with the help of Elfilin as well towards the end, which then sends Fecto Elfilis running in his soul form. Fecto Elfilis had escaped to the isolated isles in soul form, where it fed off of the souls of other creatures to stay alive, including Leongar. Now, hopefully you've been following along with other Kirby games, because this is where it starts to get very, very confusing. Because right where Soul Forgo is about to attack Kirby and of course Elfilin, In comes Morpho Knight, and this is a special creature that's been floating around since some of the earlier Kirby games, which we know is some type of ancient mysterious creature of power, where it's able to suck the essence out of a character as it did Galactonite and use its power in order to create a physical form. I told you it would get pretty confusing, but Morpho Knight doesn't stay here for a very long time. In fact, his story isn't really touched on too much with this DLC, so to make things simpler, Kirby and Elfilin are able to defeat Morpho Knight, which then releases the essence of Soul Forgo that he consumed. Now, Soul Forgo is ready for yet again another fight, and using the leftover power from Morpho Knight, he's able to transform once again into his Fecto Elfilis form, but this time in a stronger, more soul form. This is Chaos Elfilis, and normally these boss battle extra things at the end, like the arenas and true arenas, aren't normally canon, but for this game, it actually might be, because it does tie in directly to the post game. I mean, we literally seen Elfilis fly away, so it makes me assume that the Ultimate Cup Z is actually canon, where we fight the soul form of Fecto Elfilis, or Chaos Elfilis in this case. But at the end, Kirby and Elfilin are able to completely eradicate Chaos Elfilis and save the day. But of course, we know this isn't the end of the story, because this is where the DLC picks off of. Well, that meteor was foretold by legend to eventually come, and this is exactly when it happens, right after Kirby completely defeats Fecto Elfilis. Now, thanks to the figurines, once again, we get to learn more about this meteor that fell, and it's called the Evil Meteor. This was supposed to fall on the planet's last continent, but the starries interfered and threw it off course. A volcanic island emerged on impact, and the newly crystallized starries fell to different regions of the continent. This shape hides an evil being with the power to annihilate lying inside, waiting to pounce. Well, why would this meteor be trying to land on the last continent? Well, the last continent is the Redgar Forbidden Lands, which is a volcanic wasteland, but it's also home to Lab Discovera, where they did all the scientific research in captivity of Fecto Elfilis. Of course, we'll touch more on that in a second. We also have the sealed meteor figurine that reads, "As the legend goes, a meteor has passed countless times over the eons. The story has been handed down as a poem that is said to tell of a future with a meteor attack that can sink continents or wipe out all life. The legend is mostly forgotten, but now a new meteor falls." Now this is where I was a little confused. It once again brings up the poem and the legend of a meteor striking the Forgotten Land, but it also says how countless times meteors have passed over throughout the eons, which shows that the Forgotten Land is a very old land. Eons can be hundreds of millions to billions of years old, and it's said over the eons, which is plural, which shows just how incredibly ancient this world is, and it leads me to 100% believe the Forgotten Land was home to the ancients that we know about in Kirby lore. But what do they mean by a meteor has passed countless times over the eons? Is it just a regular rock meteor? Was it heart-shaped meteors like this one? Or was it this specific one? I don't think it's this specific one, and to me, the wording tells me that maybe they're just talking about meteors flying by and missing the planet, but they knew that one would eventually hit, and it was an evil one. But why did the meteor crash land away from its destination of Redgar, and why was it sealed away in crystal when it crash landed? Well, that's where the starries come in. Well, the figurine descriptions come in clutch once again, with one stating the planet protector starries. It states, "The starries are full of mystery. Where are they from? Where do they go? Spirits born from gems, they're also called children of the stars, as they often sail blissfully through space. It's said they once crystallized a fiend capable of destroying the entire galaxy." Whoa, that brings in some serious lore implications and answers some questions that really start to make sense and connect some dots here. So first off, the starries are kind of like Lumas in the Kirby franchise, where they're just little star children, and it seems like in this franchise with Kirby, their whole purpose is to seal and protect the galaxy from evil, which is pretty cool. They're like little guardians of the galaxy. You see what I did there? But it states that they once crystallized a fiend that was capable of destroying the entire galaxy. Now, I know a lot of people I see online instantly went to Galactonite. I don't think this was Galactonite. Galactonite never really posed a threat to the entire galaxy. In fact, he was actually defeated multiple times by Meta Knight, so clearly he's never been that strong. In fact, he was called one of the greatest warriors in the galaxy, not necessarily somebody that would destroy a galaxy. There's one creature that fits this description absolutely perfectly, and that is Void Termina from Kirby Star Allies. Void Termina was literally deemed the destroyer of worlds, probably one of the most intense ancient evils that the series has ever seen. It was originally sealed in the Jamba heart by 4 warriors using heart spears a long time ago. Highness, one of the only members of the Ancients that we've gotten to see in the series so far, was able to actually free the creature from his slumber. Now this is pretty interesting and a strange coincidence if otherwise, because why in the world is there another ancient evil that's also imprisoned in a crystallized heart, but this one is purple compared to the starry blue? It makes me think that there's some sort of connection here. Now it says that the starries once helped to imprison an ancient evil before, which would obviously be Void Termina based on the theory that we're going off here. But according to Star Allies, 4 warriors were the ones that imprisoned Void Termina. Well, maybe those warriors and the ancient civilization were the ones that created the starries, in case they weren't there and couldn't be around in the future when the civilization of different planets and galaxies needed help. So the starries worked as little pawns or small cherubs or angels for the ancients when they inevitably would die out. Think of them as like the ancient soldiers or guardians, they're ancient protectors. So maybe just like the Lore Star Cutter, they too were also a creation of the ancients. I mean, they share the same colorway and also they have the same symbol on their faces compared to the mask of the ship of the Lore Star Cutter, being that little blue swirl. But the home of the starries would tell us exactly where the ancients actually came from. And thankfully, there is some more dialogue based on the Lost Starry figurine that states, "These children of a mysterious twinkling planet have the power to contain the evil meteor. They fall to the various regions of the world and become crystals, waiting for someone to guide them. Individually, their power isn't great, but gathered together, they can seal away great evil." And then we have the Lost Starries figurine that states, "These children of a mysterious twinkling planet have the power to contain the evil meteor. In the distant past, they traveled through time, crossed the galaxy, and discovered a planet-destroying meteor. They became planet protectors, turning themselves to crystals to seal away the meteor." So this twinkling planet that they're from, where is that? Is that actually where the ancients are from? Are they not from the Forgotten Land? Instead, they are actually from a different planet? It also says they traveled through time to get here and to stop this meteor. So clearly it sounds like someone sent them. They had a mission, they had a journey, and they were confused and lost once they crash landed, and that's where Kirby picked up in order to help guide them. But who sent them? And they sent them through time? Are the ancients actually sending things through time from the past? There's a lot of questions still that we might not have answers to, but let's move on towards the end of the Star-Crossed World DLC, where the sealing wasn't enough, and the creature breaks free, sucks in the power of the starries, and flies into the skies. We then see the creature the entire time is Meteonelfilis. However, the full name is Parastella Crystallis Genwell Meteonelfilis. Yeah, that's a tongueful. Now, if we look at the figurine for Meteo, it states, "The legend of the meteor was considered a fantasy from ancient times, but with the discovery of ID F86, which is Fecto Elfilis, and the sinking of the islands, it seemed there might be some truth to the story. Just as the ancient researchers predicted, the evil meteor soared through space determined to destroy the world." We then have a figurine of both Elfilis and Meteonelfilis, and it states, "Invasive species from distant stars. 2 relative invaders were born in a distant corner of the galaxy. Having seen the failure of his kin who had gone to the planet earlier, the elder brother, Meteonelfilis, followed. Using the starries, he took a more advanced form, but thanks to Kirby's efforts, the long history of invasions is at an end." So that alone just gives us our whole story of this whole DLC with Star-Crossed Worlds. Meteonelfilis is the older brother of Elfilis, and it actually came to avenge his younger brother. It also explains why he, the meteor, was supposed to land in the last continent, which is Redgar, because he was trying to find Lab Discovera, where his younger brother had been held captive this whole time. However, what's interesting about this is we actually get to see inside of that meteor when it landed, and you can see from the inside there does seem to be some type of alternate version of Fecto Forgo, which is kind of confusing to me, because the only reason Fecto Forgo was a thing is because the scientists of this world duplicated it into 2 forms, being Elfilin and Forgo. So why in the world was Meteo in this form when he landed? Does that mean he has a counterpart somewhere else? Is there another Elfilin somewhere or something? Because that would be the only thing that makes sense. Well, maybe the starries actually limited its power from the beginning, because it seems like once it captures all the starries at the very end is the only way it was able to transform into its true form. Still, even if the starries were able to deduce it into its Forgo form, it too should have had an Elfilin form. At least that's what makes sense to me. But Kirby and Elfilin fight the older brother of Fecto Elfilis, which is also kind of Elfilin's older brother as well. And we know thanks to the power of the starries, he's a lot stronger than his younger brother. But after going through various different forms, even getting bigger and turning into a crystallized eyeball, Kirby and Elfilin are able to completely defeat the brother as well. At least that's until you play Ultimate Cup ZX. If you notice at the end, in the back of the arena, the scepter actually falls down and spawns in. This is for Ultimate Cup ZX, where you're able to fight the older brother and then the younger brother once again in his chaos form, where he also has the spear of his older brother, if you catch my drift. There's actually an in-game description for the spears as well that states Elfilis spear and Antares Meteonelfilis spear. The description states 2 spears, Antares and Ares, Elfilis, the invasive species that traveled to this planet, forged one by absorbing materials to become complete. By grasping the other crystal spear Meteonelfilis left behind, they were able to gain the power of the starries and become the ultimate Lord of Chaos. So there's still a lot more we have to figure out with the rest of this lore, especially with the whole starry situation. But it seems like the whole story with Fecto Elfilis is very simple. A long time ago, there was a prophecy that was going to tell of a meteor striking the world of the Forgotten Land, but a lot of people thought it was just an old wise tale. Eventually, one day, Fecto Elfilis comes to invade, and the people of this world lock him up and use his power and technology in order to travel across the stars, using their own planetary spaceship and the powers of Fecto Elfilis to power it. After being split through a laboratory accident and the people of the Forgotten Land leaving the world behind, he was able to actually control the animals of this world in order to bring Elfilin back to him so he could become whole again. After seeing that Fecto Elfilis attacked, they realized that that meteor probably would be coming, so they decided to hurry up and leave this planet before that ever happened. The meteor eventually does come in the form of Meteonelfilis, which is the older brother coming to avenge his younger brother. Kirby's able to defeat them both and save the day, using the help of the starries, which actually was able to imprison Meteonelfilis once again. Now, it's not really told what happens with Meteonelfilis, because we know he's not completely defeated. He's just imprisoned into that heart structure once again and zoomed across the galaxy. So are they taking him back home through time, back to their own twinkling planet, back to the ancients back in time? Who knows? But yeah, that's pretty much the lore of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. However, there's one last thing that did make me question if the developers put it in there for a reason. In the very beginning and the very end, Elfilin says something pretty interesting about the starries. In the beginning, he mentions how he hears a voice that actually can help him translate what the starries are saying. And at the end, Elfilin has this weird feeling that he was wrapped in the embrace of the starries, but in the past. And he claims it's how he was able to hear their voices as well. Now, this could just be a story device for the developers to have a reason why Elfilin could actually hear the starries, or it could mean something deeper. Are they kind of alluding to there's some type of connection to Elfilin and the starries and maybe the people that created the starries? I mean, it's pretty strange that these starries went through time and across the galaxy just to stop Meteonelfilis. So someone clearly sent them here on a mission. Why didn't they send them here to stop Fecto Elfilis when he came? So it makes me wonder if there's a reason why Elfilis and Meteonelfilis was created in the first place. Were they a creation of like evil ancients, very similar to Highness and Void Termina? Were they sent through time and space as well, and were the starries sent as a rebuttal to that? It's hard to say, but it's pretty crazy how they were able to track a creature through time and space and across the galaxy, especially if they didn't have anything to do with that creature's existence in the first place, right? Of course, there's still a lot of questions to be asked and things to figure out with the story, these characters, things like Morpho Knight, even Void Termina, the imprisoning, the starries, their home planet, the ancients, Lore Starcutter. There's a lot of questions to be had here, but maybe you guys can help me out with some of these down below. So if you have any more ideas or theories of your own as to what some of these things tie into, comment them down below and maybe you can trigger yourself a new video where you can be shouted out as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Nintendo in general. And like always, I'll see you all on the next one. And I hope you all have a blessed day. See ya, guys.